Is Pokémon Legends ZA actually an open world game? Well, according to Google, it technically is. It's open world, but the world here is Lumio City. This is interesting to me. It's the most interesting part of the game because I'm 4 hours into the game so far as of writing this very paragraph, and I'm getting a few mixed signals. On one hand, the game sets itself up like it's preparing you for this explorative journey, yet the game's exposition moves so slowly and the framework is so rigid that it seems to contradict this. But, hold on. That doesn't mean the game hasn't been fun. Your boy's having a great time so far. I just can't help but constantly notice that this game seems to have a split creative direction. I won't be going crazy with spoilers, but I will discuss the opening sequence of the game and some minor points here or there. If you don't want to see or hear about the game at all, then click away. Although I would say it's pretty odd to click on this video if you don't want to see anything about the game, but hey, you do you, baby. Let's start from the beginning. For reasons unknown to me, and maybe to everyone else, we are on a train to Lumio City. After we arrive, we're hit with a speed blitz of doom from our newest rival, the female rival Tawny, the one I have in my game, or the male rival Urbane. She immediately discloses that she's on the hunt for an unsuspecting tourist to use in an advertisement video for the hotel she lives at and represents, I guess. And this is where it begins. Every single action you take for the better part of the next 2 hours is under the strict guidance of Tawny, or Urbane. Don't you dare even think about exploring, because if you even try to take a dip into an alleyway, Tawny will grab you by your throat and drag you to the intended destination. Now, if this was an opening segment that lasted roughly 30 minutes, I think I wouldn't have even noticed. But because this is what my first 2 hours consisted of, I was a little put off. I even waited until my fiance Victoria started her playthrough to see if she felt the same way. And sure enough, around the same time I started to think about how it was getting a bit crazy with the restriction, she said to me, "This guy really doesn't want me to go anywhere, does he?" I was cracking up. Now look, it doesn't really matter. I'm now roughly 8 hours into the game, and it's not really been an issue since, but there are some times where I feel like I get roped into strict quest lines. I have a theory for this. I think the developers wanted to limit how much free roam you could do in the streets, because the players in the game might start to notice some things. You might start seeing some dents in the game's armor. It may show too much of the game's weak spot. The weak spot here? The repeating building assets and the endless hallway vibe that Lumios can give off at times. Now let me be extra clear. I am having a great time playing the game. I've already said this. I've kicked up the old feet. I've explored the world of Pokemon. It always hits. Even if the games are weaker ones like BDSP, these are just some observations I've made as someone who is a fan of the series and a fan of game development. Going off of memory here, from what I remember about Legends Arceus, there was a bigger feeling of I have now walked through the gates out into this big blue world, and it is time to find my way. Compared to Legends ZA. That doesn't necessarily mean that PLA did everything better. I'm just comparing these two for the sake of discussion since this is the next game in that series. I think that's fair. That doesn't necessarily mean that Legends ZA has less freedom. I do think that in some ways, it can actually have more at times. In ZA, once the tutorial shackles come off, you can choose how you want to build up your portfolio, so to speak. Do you want to catch a ton of Pokemon in wild areas to work on completing your task for the professor who's very loud and very blue? Or would you rather always have your challenger ticket ready to go for the next big fight in the story? Or do you just want to keep farming money at night so you can buy every single item of clothing in the game like my fiance does? I really enjoy that you can put the brakes on the adventure and do what you please. You technically were able to do this in PLA, except the side quests to me felt very one note. Most of them were just fetch quests with some okay ones kind of mixed in. I've had a damn good time in ZA tackling the laundry list of very rewarding side quests. Most of them very different from the previous. You have some fetch quests, yeah, but a lot of battling ones, or like show me this Pokemon ones, the shiny Mareep one, which I loved, and the side quests for the Kalos starters, which was super cool to discover organically. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though the world itself isn't as open or visually distinct compared to PLA, Pokemon Legends ZA does indeed offer very similar, if not more, open world-esque experiences. You just have to look at the rest of the game. Okay, checking in here. Just rolled credits on Legends ZA. I started writing this as I was playing and kept writing more and more as I continued, so yeah. I have a little more to say about the open world conversation, and man, I am glad that I waited to finish writing this video until I beat the game. The way that the side missions complement the main story missions, absolutely lovely. I can say this with full certainty now that I see the bigger picture. They operate like breaks from the main story, but the rewards don't fall short most of the time. Some of these missions even offer really solid held items like the scope lens or leftovers to help your Pokemon out with some of these tough battles. These don't facilitate any feelings of linearity at all. In fact, they can be skipped completely and have no bearing on the outcome of the main missions or the story itself. To me, that's a key element in an open world game. Optional, yet rewarding side quests. I'm mentioning the side quests again because I wanted to make sure that the story wasn't undercut in any way by the side quests, and that wasn't the case at all, so that's nice. That's why I wanted to wait until I completed the game. The main story does feature some heavy use of bumpers along the way, particularly in the final sequence of the game. No spoilers. Story bumpers are a term that I came up with to describe non-skippable moments or segments of story beats in video games that take place in an open world yet do not allow you to deviate from their pre-formed path. The bumper name is in reference to bowling, where you could bowl with bumpers up and still technically play, but within certain set boundaries. In this case, the bumpers might help you finish the story with minimal hiccups, but you don't necessarily get that full feeling of, I did this. I think they're used mostly when it's easier to do so than it would be to cultivate a complex path that will drive every player's actions accurately, even if each player plays differently. Let me explain with an example. Let's use Breath of the Wild as an example. The ultimate goal is to free Hyrule Castle from Ganon's grasp and rescue Zelda. Along the way, you can take back the divine beasts who are under the control of Blight Ganons to help your cause. If you manage to take back all 4 of these divine beasts, your final fight with Ganon will feature an opening cutscene where the spirits of the 4 guardians who died trying to protect the divine beasts take control of their respective beasts one final time to absolutely light up Ganon, forcing him to start with a good chunk of his HP missing. This is the golden goose for how to provide freedom of choice within a thin veil of structure. They're technically main missions, but you do not have to partake in freeing the divine beasts to beat Ganon, but not doing so would result in you missing out on a good chunk of the game's story. Why miss the lore bombs? They're the best part. Oh, and obviously, this makes the Ganon fight easier, which can be nice. But this is the beauty in how the developers made that lack of rigidity work for them, not against them. Most developers probably have a fear that if they don't explicitly lay out paths for their players, that people will find things too confusing and drop their game altogether before reaching the end. It's natural and it's totally understandable. In fact, it makes sense. So how do you guide players in certain directions while simultaneously promoting complete freedom of choice? You show instead of telling. Now, I am sure there are a ton of gamers out there who may have skipped at least 1 or 2, heck, all of the divine beasts and just fast track straight to Ganon so they can roll the credits. But after seeing what they might have missed out on, they could go back and take down those divine beasts, get them back from the Ganon Blight's control, just so they can see the true full ending. This is beautiful game design that facilitates replayability organically. It also was a masterclass in how to garner interest in your story's characters so you can capitalize on this later down the line. I'm looking at the Champions Ballad DLC. You create hunger for more. I'll liken it to this. For those who aren't in school anymore, like your boy, you know how when you're finally done with school, you find yourself interested in learning more than ever? At least that's what happened to me. Once I left an environment that was forcing me in the same direction without much freedom, I developed this insatiable desire to know more. Now let's apply this to game design. In Legends ZA, and even Legends Arceus, I found myself more interested in exploring the world after the story was over, because I felt free to finally do so. Before I rolled credits, I had this underlying feeling of procrastination, like I can't explore until I finish my homework first. In Breath of the Wild, the developers baked this sense of wonder into their game's core. Legends ZA created a story and injected it into an open world setting. Breath of the Wild threaded their story inside of their world. They built that beautiful story around this world that feels like it has a soul. They created this feeling that their world will continue to live on, even when this one story is over. So where do I stand now? Is Legends ZA truly an open world experience? Well, I would say yes. Even though it doesn't stand with the same might as Breath of the Wild, my example of peak open world, it still did what it needed to do to fit the definition itself. Is it the purest form? Is it absolutely peak? No, but it doesn't have to be. To me, it just has to tell an interesting story, have fun game mechanics, and have elements of open worldness that make me want more. All of those boxes are checked. I am not interested in getting into a debate about what makes a good Pokemon game. Maybe I could do a whole big video on that if the interest is there. I just like to have interesting and thought-provoking discussions about video game companies and their design philosophies. You know, the real sexy stuff. I don't think every conversation about Pokemon has to be comparative. I also don't think it's necessary to argue over the future of this franchise. We all love the Pokemon games. That's why we buy them. And if you skip a generation, good on you. If you love all the games, even if some are objectively low quality video games, also good on you. I think Pokemon fans shouldn't be spending their time arguing, because the fact of the matter is, regardless if you're arguing for more or arguing that everything is fine just how it is, it all comes from a place of agreement. The agreement being that discovering the world of Pokemon is fun. It always has been. Some just want more. Some are okay with how it is. And that's okay. Love what you love, baby. And if you have entered this little big world of Lumio City, I hope you have the experience you are looking for. I'll see y'all soon. Peace.